Hello there, and welcome back to the Chap's Guide. My name is Ash, and I'm your host on this journey through men's style, self-development, and personal grooming. Now, a few weeks ago, I put a message on our community page of the Chap's Guide channel on YouTube, saying that I was going to do a Q&A video on wristwatches, encouraged some questions from you folks, and I was inundated. In fact, I've got so many questions, we're probably going to have to break these up into two separate videos to cover all of them. So thanks for these. Let us get started and move along. So the first one comes from Rob, and he says, "Hi Ash, I hope you're doing well." I am. Thank you for providing the great content on your channel. It is my pleasure. It really does make a difference. My timepiece question is, if you had to start collecting watches all over again and you weren't to include Rolex or Tudor, what other luxury brands would you choose and why? And are there any other non-Rolex luxury brands you're interested in? Stay safe and well. Great question. Thank you very much, Rob. Right, so if I was going to buy a watch today, it's probably the best way to answer this. If I was going to buy a couple of watches today and they were not Tudor or Rolex, what would I buy? And for me, it's going to be Oris. I'm a big fan of the Oris brand. I've never owned any, but I like the ethos of the company. They are a fabulous Swiss company. They go way back, way beyond Rolex. They have a great heritage of making quality wristwatches, and in their current selection there are quite a few pieces which I find myself being attracted to, of which the one which I think I would put on my wrist if I had the opportunity would be the Oris Diver 65, because it's quite a retro looking watch. It's not too big, it's not too thick, it's the sort of watch that you could wear every day and it's going to look good with the clothing and the situations that you find yourself in. They also produce the 65 Diver in a wide variety of colorways and materials. So there is something for everybody in that range. So if I didn't have a Rolex or a Tudor, I would definitely be thinking about the Oris 65 for my day-to-day casual watch. If I was to buy a second watch, which I was looking to fulfill perhaps a more smart watch element in my collection, absolutely no doubt it would be the Jaeger-LeCoultre JLC Reverso. I love the Reverso, I like the idea of it, I like its heritage. You know, it harks back its history to being originally a sports watch, which was worn by British officers playing polo, and the Reverso capability of being able to flip the watch over to protect the dial was to stop it getting damaged by the puck, or whatever they call it, in polo. If it got struck by one of those, it would shatter the dial, so it was reversible. I love it. I think it's classic, elegant, and I've got a bit of a soft spot for rectangular watches. So I hope that answers your question. So the next question from Matthew de Klerk says, what attracts you to Rolex and Tudor versus other brands like Omega, etc.? And what are your recommendations for a 3-watch collection? Tough one. Okay. First of all, what attracts me to Rolex and Tudor? It's true to say I do have a collection which is small, but right now, this moment, it is entirely full of Rolex and Tudor watches. In fact, wristwatch check. Today I am wearing my latest acquisition, that is the Rolex GMT Master 2 in the blue-red configuration, commonly referred to as the Pepsi. So lovely watch, and it's true, I do like Rolex. What attracts me to them? Certainly its heritage and its history. I like the fact, particularly with Rolex, and when we say Rolex, we acknowledge that Rolex and Tudor are essentially part of the same family, they're the same brand, they were created by the same founder, so the ethos is the same for me when I think of Tudor as when I think of Rolex. I like the fact that Hans Wilsdorf, the founder of Rolex, founded it in London, with his partner, I think it's Alfred Davis. You know, it is essentially a British company which over time has upped sticks and moved to Switzerland, and it's now, you know, obviously a Swiss brand. but its roots, its origin lies in Britain. Hans Wilsdorf, he's an Anglophile, hence the fact that Tudor is called Tudor because of its, sort of association with the monarchs of this country, the House of Tudor, and the Rolex crown is because of the association with monarchy. British monarchy. So, Hans Wilsdorf, absolutely, totally pro-British, supported Britain in many ways over the years, even to the extent of extending a line of credit to British officers who were in German prisoner of war camps during the Second World War. He would send them wristwatches, Rolex watches, on the proviso that at the end of the war, when they were released from prison, they would make good that payment. They would pay for their watches. In fact, he sent them, the watch on credit. And the vast majority of those watches were paid for when the officers were released from their prison camps. And this is something that Hans Wilsdorf did not have to do, but he did it because he was an Anglophile. He supported Great Britain. So I love that about him. I love that whole ethos. And of course, being a patriot, I'm British, that attracts me incredibly. Also, of course, Rolex are robust. They're incredibly tough watches. You can do anything you like with them. They're water resistant. They've got screw down crowns. They're watches that you do not have to baby in any way. Same goes for Tudor. They're rough and rugged. They're expensive, so you probably wouldn't want to throw them around. But, truth is, you can do anything you like to a Rolex, and it's going to come on through just like a tank. So I really like that element of it. It's classy, yet tough as old boots, and it's heritage. So I hope that answers that. Why do I like them opposed to other watches like Omega and so on? There's no reason. It's just that that's the reason why I would, head towards a Rolex. As a younger person, yes, I was attracted to Omegas as well, but I seem to have gone down the Rolex route, and right now I have no desire to purchase any Omegas. There's nothing in their range which really sings out to me. They tend to be quite big, so I prefer watches on the sort of 40mm and less size, and Rolex just fulfills that category a little bit better for me than the Omega catalogue at the moment. Plus, of course, there's always the thing that if you buy a Rolex, you are never going to lose money, which cannot be said for Omega and other brands. 3 watch collection. Ho ho. Now that is a toughie, is it not? And you haven't given me a price bracket here, so I'm open to, say anything I like. And I made a list. It was so difficult to make a decision over what I would pick if I was to have a dream 3 watch collection with no budget, all right? No budget being the key thing. And this is what I've come up with. I'm picking my 3 watches in 3 different categories. I want a sports watch, I want a day-to-day watch, and I want a smart watch, all right? A smart formal watch. For my sports watch, I'm going to choose the Patek Philippe Aquanaut. I know, they're not obtainable, but you didn't say they had to be obtainable, all right? This is the 3 watch collection of my fantasy. So I'm going to go for the Patek Philippe Aquanaut in stainless steel. And I've got the reference number here. It's the 5167A, which is the 41mm watch. I believe it's on the black tropical strap. It is absolutely beautiful. I like the Aquanaut. It's not too big. It's nice and lean. It's only 8.1mm thick. So it's going to sit nicely on the wrist. It's 120m water resistant, and it's tough enough to wear as a sports watch, so I rather like that. For my casual day-to-day watch, now again, I'm going to be really extravagant here. I'm wearing a GMT Master 2, and my watch of choice is going to be a Rolex GMT Master 2, but it is going to be the all gold version of this watch, the root beer, the full gold root beer. Now, I absolutely am a huge fan of gold, all right? A lot of people don't like gold these days. They will buy stainless steel over gold all day long. For me, that is insanity. Gold is a precious metal. It's on the, on the periodic table. It is an element in its own right. It is permanent. Gold is perpetual. It will always be here in some form or another. And I really love the gold, and I love the Everose gold, which the GMT Master 2 all gold models are made of in the Rolex range. I've actually got the half gold, the bi-metal version of the root beer, And I love the lustrous radiance which comes from that Everose gold. It's sort of the pinky gold has a sort of antiquated appearance to it, which for me I find more attractive than a yellow gold version. So that's what I would pick. It might be extravagant, but it's my choice. And finally, and I've already mentioned it in my last question, really, the answer I gave, my smartwatch would be a Jaeger-LeCoultre, a JLC Reverso. And I would go for the medium size because I've got a medium size physique, so I don't want a big old watch. So I go for a medium size. I would go for a gold case material with a black leather strap, utterly classic in that beautiful size. You know, it's quite a simple watch in many respects, and the more simple the better, I think, when it comes to smart. But that is my 3 watch collection. Thanks for that question. It gave me a lot of thought, but those were the 3 that I came up with. Now the next question is from Carl J, and he asked me, if you were to own a Bremont, I'd be interested to know what you think of it. Well, I don't own a Bremont, but I have admired them for a long time. Again, I've mentioned I am a patriot and I'm British, and I have enjoyed the fact that there is a watchmaker in the luxury market today which is fully British in its nature. You know, Bremont is a company which is seemingly doing rather well. They're bringing out lots of new watches. I don't personally own one because looking at their selection, and funny enough, I was only in an authorised dealer the other day and I admired some of their watches, but they are quite utilitarian in nature, which is fine if you like that sort of thing, but they do tend to be somewhat large as well. They do tend to be quite chunky. And as I've said, you know, I am a guy of medium proportion. I am 5'9", so I'm not a big hulking man, and I really don't like wearing watches much beyond 40 millimeters, and I really don't like watches which are big, thick units. I like a watch, even, you know, as you can see, I'm wearing a GMT Master 2 by Rolex today, and that slips easily under the cuff of my shirt, which is important to me because I often wear jackets and shirts. So if I had a watch, for instance, which was causing, you know, my shirt to ruck up against it and it was uncomfortable and I had to keep constantly sort of tucking it in, that would be an issue for me. And I'm afraid that Bremont watches tend to be fairly large. I know there are some which are not, but you know, it's all about that's the beauty of wristwatches. It's all about subjectivity. If you like its look, if you like that utilitarian, functional, almost, you know, military-ish look, that is absolutely fine. I actually find, for me as well, they are a bit expensive. You know, they are in the sort of Tudor financial range to a large degree. And if I was standing looking at Tudor and I was looking at Bremont, you know, Tudor, in-house movements, tried and tested watches, been around a long time. They've got the big brother relationship with Rolex, so you know they share R&D and certain other aspects of their sort of manufacturing process. I would think to myself, do you know what? For my money, I think I would err on the side of caution and go with Tudor rather than take a gamble and go with Bremont. That's just my thoughts. Don't let that influence you in any way. If you like the look of it, that's the important thing. You've got to wear it. Okay, let's move along. Right, next question. And it is a question from Jay. Now, Jay's regular contributor to the video, I know, a big watch aficionado himself. And he says, I'd be interested to hear your observations as an ex-law enforcement professional about the epidemic of watch crime. Is there anything that could be done to crack down on this? For example, if there was a national register of serial numbers, which by law had to be checked by dealers or private individuals before they bought a watch to check that if it wasn't stolen. Well, yeah, excellent point. You know, yes, I was only reading the newspaper in the last few weeks, and there is really and truly an epidemic of robbers who are targeting people who wear desirable watches because they know, particularly if they're Rolex, there's a lot of liquidity in those watches. They can be stolen and converted into cash very quickly, very easily. And that is the issue, I think, with a national register of wristwatches. It would be great if, you know, there was a register. There are registers of property which currently people can sign property in with, so if things get stolen, not just watches but other items as well. There's a national database which you can register your items on in the UK, but of course that only really works if the people who are buying and selling the items are legitimate. All right. The problem with stolen goods is that they tend to change hands in illegal situations. All right, so somebody will go into a pub, you'll be offered a Rolex for a fraction of its real value, and you will buy it knowing that it's stolen, but who's going to know? And that's the issue, right? Lots of stolen property changes hands in that manner, and those people who buy those watches or any other stolen items for that matter are never going to check a database, and that's the issue there. So the idea of having a national database falls flat on its face for me, because the majority of stolen property will change hands outside any enforceable process. There'll be people selling them on, out through the back door or in a bar. So there will never be any sort of enforceable way of managing the sale and purchasing of these properties. But the best way to stay safe is to think carefully about your environment. Now, I've got to be honest, I have worked in law enforcement for 20 something years now, and the best way to avoid crime is just to be very thoughtful and careful. If you're going into a big city, all right, and it's summertime, you're wearing a short sleeve shirt, do not wear your highly expensive watch visible. All right, leave that watch at home. Wear the Seiko or the Timex for that day that you're going into the city, particularly if you're going into big cities like London and other big cities where we know there are organised crime groups who will target people because they've got highly visible, attractive and expensive watches on. So on those occasions, don't do it. In the winter time, perhaps when you're wearing a long jacket, nobody can see what watch you're wearing, you're a lot safer. Even then though, if you go into a cafe and you're sat down and your sleeve rides up, be aware, the walls have eyes. People are looking out for that watch. If they spot it, you will be followed and you will be robbed at knife point somewhere where they will relieve you of your pride and joy. It's better to leave it at home and wear it in environments in which you are entirely safe. And that's my advice around keeping safe around wristwatches. Now, I'm going to do one more. I know we've rattled on a bit, but one more in this part 1 video. And that is, question from Ryan, who says, service costs and intervals for mechanical watches. There's more to owning them than just buying them. Absolutely true. This is a point often overlooked for people new to collecting mechanical watches. You are so true, Ryan, because I've bought a number of watches over a short space of time recently because the Rolex sort of bubble is escalating, and I bought a number of watches as quickly as I could. I've bought a Datejust, a Submariner, and a couple of GMTs in the last 3 or 4 years, which means all of those watches will be requiring a service at roughly the same time, within a year of each other. And just so you're aware, the average service of, say, a Rolex watch after 10 years, which is the current interval, if you buy a Rolex watch today, it will typically have a 10-year interval before it needs a service, unless something goes wrong in the meantime. But that is going to cost you £600, £700, £800. It's variable, it will change, but it's expensive. It's far more than the cost of a service on your car, for instance. So if you've bought 3 watches all in the same year, they're all going to be coming up for service at roughly the same time. So it could be an expensive thing. So it is worth bearing that in mind. It's also worth bearing it in mind if you're buying a watch which is pre-owned and it's, say, 8 years old, 9 years old. You might think you've got it for a very good price, but in 2 years' time, you're going to have to fork out £700-800 for that service. It might affect your overall thoughts about the financial viability of buying that watch. So you make an excellent point, Ryan. It is very worthwhile thinking about the servicing. Of course, you don't have to have the service. Many people will say, your watch can roll on for 20 years without being serviced. Have it serviced if there is any issues with it. If it starts to lose time or it stops working, then get it serviced. Some might say that's a false economy because it might need more work in the long run, if you wait until something goes wrong to have it fixed, then it would be having it serviced regularly, where, you know, items and issues can be addressed early on. It's a matter for you, of course. It's your money, it's your watch. But definitely do think about it when you're buying those watches. You make an excellent point. So there we go. That is it for this part 1 video on watches, questions and answers. There will be a part 2 following fast on its heels, maybe in another week or so. I'm going to film it straight away. So it's going to be in the can. It's just a matter of when we release it. Thank you for the questions you've sent in today. Could have made this video without them. Keep sending them in. Of course, I will answer them when the opportunity presents itself. If you have enjoyed the video, don't forget, give us a thumbs up. And if you're not a member, click that red button and subscribe to the Chap's Guide. That way you won't miss any of our future material. Until the next time, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you again very soon.